So, update on the world's first Maserati Granturismo Turbo. So far, we have a downpipe. By the way, I do make all this fabrication stuff, if that's not obvious. I've built quite a few turbo kits on cars. A good amount of them are posted on JB Engines and stuff like that on Instagram if you go to JB Engines. But it's obvious that I sort of have an idea that I know what I'm doing. Starting off with the coolant system, and I kind of knew that was gonna have to happen, and it's convenience because no more Maserati parts. It's just 1.75" pipe with 5-ply 1.75" couplers that you can get from anywhere. So it's when the car's no longer supported with these kinds of parts, they're going to kind of die off unless you do stuff like this. Not necessarily the turbo stuff, of course. This is just my preference. At any rate, so the turbo is mounted, intercooler is mounted, both are mounted to the bar across here using M8 hardware. Turbo has a mount on it. I've got this extended 10 ORB to 10 AN drain line. I'm gonna have to figure out some clearance. I didn't know it was gonna stick out that far, so I may or may not even be able to use it. We'll see, because of the angle. I'm also using, because the drastic angle of the turbo. I would say that the turbo is kicked back more than I would like, but for fitment, that's the name of the game. You kind of have to deal with some things. And then the drain, the housing is also not perfectly, up and down. It's off to the side as well. So the adjustable vibrant inserts for their feed line. That way I can kind of more or less tune the oil supply to the turbo so that it doesn't smoke a bunch if it ever has any problems. I've seen turbos on pro mod cars and stuff like that. They're not the comp oilless turbos, they are oiled turbos. Precision doesn't make an oilless turbo at this point in time. Maybe they will in the future, but that is an option to go with oilless. This is a cheaper turbo. I believe cheaper things that are still good quality keep it fun. They keep the project moving. You don't have to spend $4,000 and $5,000 on a turbo when you're only shooting for 600 horsepower. So this is a VS Racing 6270 with a 95 hot side. This is the ball bearing unit, so they're around $1,000 at this point in time. I've had really good luck with VS turbos on fun projects. Obviously, for more serious cars, my class legal drag car runs a comp turbo. You just got to go with, the best of the best if you want to be competitive. But this car is a street car, and in anything that I run that's not competitive, we run a VS Racing turbo. I even built a turbo kit on a Vet with a VS 88 110, and that car actually set some records for the Vet community. Is a stick shift Vet records on like 18-inch wheels or whatever it was. Anyways, the guy made 1,300 horsepower and had that turbo on his car for 5 years. I mean, relentless, gnarly two steps. That's race car stuff, and he's abused the shit out of it. So we're like, if it gives up, then they're cheap to replace or whatever. So who cares? But he never had any issues with it, and he actually sold me that turbo. But Any rate, so yeah, I've had really good luck with VS turbos for not so serious cars, if you want to put it that way. Your average Joe can run a VS turbo and notice zero difference between a comp and a VS. So, any rate, that's why I chose the VS turbo. It's cheap, keeps the project moving, it's fun. This intercooler is, I don't know, 600, 800 horsepower rated. It's a 4-inch by 6-inch core with 3/4-inch barb fittings on either side. Plan on putting the box right back here. What else? So I got a MAF housing with an air straightener in it. Basically, from my experience, so you can see I had to raise the MAF sensor. I had to make this billet spacer and then weld it in place to get the factory height out of the MAF sensor. So that is factory height. Basically, I just put it in the factory tube. I marked it where it sits in the tube, and then I just mimicked that height and then welded that flange on, and that's how that goes. I ordered this. This is a 4-inch MAF housing with an air straightener in it. Basically, I'm modeling this turbo kit after other MAF only usage cars. This is a MAF only car. It doesn't have a map, and the intake air temp sensor is integral to the MAF sensor. I did do a bunch of reads on the intake air temp sensor to break it out, or whatever you want to call it. It's usually called a MAF breakout. Basically, I plan on putting this post turbo, so it's going to go out of the bottom of the intercooler, and then the MAF is going to sit. I'll just put it on for visual. More or less, you know, it's going to look like that, and then it's just going to connect right down in there. Something along these lines. Yeah, so you can see the outlet. I'm just going to make a U, and it's going to go in. So the post turbo MAF stuff, I would say, isn't ideal, but you have to know what your limitations are. So the MAF sensor itself, what makes limitations on a MAF sensor is it can only read a certain CFM, right, before it maxes out. Obviously, that's far beyond what the car normally sees, and when you increase tube size, that also slows the air down, so it can actually read the air that's being pushed into the engine or drawn into the engine, however you want to think about it. So a 4-inch tube with a MAF, you know, a lot of the Mustang community has a lot of experience. The Coyote community has a lot of experience with MAF only cars, and because I don't even know until lately that they even had a MAP sensor anywhere, so they're MAF only. I know I had a 2013 GT Premium that had that was MAF only, and I put a Vortec blower kit on it, and it was making 6 to 650 with basically this identical setup. So I'm just mimicking what that kit had success with as far as the MAF is concerned. So basically, what I'm saying is, because the Maserati comes with a 4-inch pipe, a 4-inch tube, that likely the MAF sensor won't max out. Basically, what happens when a MAF sensor maxes out is the graph will, the airflow graph for the tuner, this is what the tuner sees. The MAF sensor airflow comes up, and then it just flatlines. But the car's still making more boost. The car's still, at 6,000 RPM, the MAF sensor just flatlines, and then you can't see anything beyond that. You could still tune it. You can still tune the car. You're just kind of tuning a little bit blind. And you're just, basically the tuners just shove a bunch of fuel at it and to make sure it's safe, and they check the O2s and the wideband, and yeah, that should be right, but it's not like terribly safe because the car really doesn't know what it's seeing up there. So basically when it does that, you have to increase in the pipe diameter, or you have to space the MAF sensor out even further. So like what I did to get the factory spacing, I would just do again and lift it up another 1/4 inch out of the pipe, because that, again, that slows the air going down, that slows the air down going through the pipe when you take the card and you move it out. Lots has been done, or a lot has been done with MAF only tunes. You know, these guys are making, 1200 plus horsepower on MAF sensors, post turbo, post blowers, not twin screws, but Vortec blowers and that kind of stuff. So I mean, for simplicity's sake, why not try the MAF sensor post turbo and retain the intake air temp? And that's really the whole point of going post turbo, is it has the intake air temp sensor inside of it, and you have to see charge air temperatures going into the engine, because that works into your timing logic. As the temperatures come up, you don't need as much timing, and in fact it's dangerous to have as much a ton of timing. So as you do a pull, let's say with an air to water setup, your water system is what your charge air temps are after. So you could say, hey, I've got this thing at 80 degrees, 70 degrees intake air temps as read by the sensor. And then as you go through the pull, right, the turbo is making more boost, which is more heated compression. And the intercooler should be able to keep up with it, but it starts heat soaking the coolant system. You can put an ice box and all that kind of stuff, but I'm just talking about, I'm just explaining how this works at this point for the Maserati community, because it doesn't really seem like there's a lot of knowledge as far as how all this shit works. So as the pull progresses, right, the intake air temps will gradually climb. I'm not talking about they just cram up, right, unless your intercooler is way too small or your water pump stops working, or whatever. But basically they just gradually climb because the cooling system for it heat soaks. As the cooling system heat soaks, then the temperature of the coolant that's in the system gradually rises. That's what heat soaking is. As it rises, it doesn't have the same ability to cool down to the same temperatures, so your intake air temps slowly rise. And we may get, a 10 degree rise throughout a pass. It really matters how much boost you're making. Again, heat of compression, 10 pounds of boost is not going to make the same turbo outlet temperature as 40 pounds of boost, or, so there's some variables here that are not just constants, right? How much boost, how much heat of compression you have is what the intercooler has to try to cool back down to whatever its coolant system pressure has. So that's kind of the basics of your intake air temps and the direct reason that you need to take intake air temps post intercooler, not pre-turbo. You can put them pre-turbo or whatever if your tune is incredibly safe and your tuner just says fuck it. You can make some sacrifices and put it pre-turbo, but it's ideal to put the intake air temp sensor post-turbo because it needs accurate actual intake air temps of what's going into the engine to make timing adjustments on throughout a pull. So timing, as intake air temps come up, timing comes down, and you may see 5 degrees of timing drop throughout a pass, right? A 1/4 mile pass or a pull on the highway. This is all transparent to you as the driver. You're just enjoying the car. But this is what keeps your motor from blowing up, is because 5 degrees is quite a bit, right? So most cars see between 15 and 30 horsepower per degree of timing, depending on your setup and everything else. So, you could lose, we could say 80 to 100 horsepower just from intake air temps. You don't take that away, then you are at higher risk for popping a head gasket, you know, melting the back two pistons. Guys will do all this kind of shit that they don't understand. Oh, the engine's weak or whatever. And it's like, well, that or your tune doesn't take enough timing away for intake air temps, or you're not even metering intake air temps that are actually going into the engine. You're pulling in ambient temperatures that are going into your turbo or your blower, and you're just guessing what these intake air temps are going into the engine. That's more or less how those setups work that don't meter intake air temps. So I say all that to say that I'm going to try it factory, completely factory, the way that it is now. Or, you know, factory sensor with intake air temp in the sensor itself. I did probe the intake air temp sensor at different temperatures to get resistance reads, and I do have I basically made a diagram for the pinout on the sensor itself, so I can depin it's called ECU reference wire to the intake air temp sensor, and then ground. That's the two wires that are in an intake air temp sensor, is ECU reference and ground. The intake air temp sensors change in resistance values as temperature goes up and down. You need to find out, because one will increase and one will decrease with temperature going up, so they can be inverse of each other intake air temp sensors. And they also don't all read the same resistance values at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Intake air temp sensor A may read 2,500 ohms. Intake air temp sensor B may read 1,000 ohms or 1,200 ohms. And likewise in the opposite direction. At ambient, they may read the same ohms, ambient air, but as temperature goes up and down, they'll be off by quite a bit, thousands of ohms. So you need to probe at different temperatures to get intake, or to get the resistance values, so that you can depin those two pins from the clip. The MAF section of the sensor then would go pre-turbo. So this housing would go before the turbo. Obviously, I would have to fabricate it and shorten it and turn it and a bunch of other stuff. And then you would take those two wires and you would wire them to a potentially even another MAF. You wouldn't be using the card of the MAF. You would be using the intake air temp sensor on a second MAF. Or you can get a intake air temp sensor that reads the same readings as the internal intake air temp sensor, and then put it in that pipe. So that's plan B. You still retain the MAF. You put it pre-turbo because the air is much cleaner, and you can actually meter it pre-turbo. It's the same air pre and post turbo. A lot of people get confused with MAF sensors, so just do your homework on that. Not going to get in any kind of debates over how a MAF reads air, but what a speed density car does with a MAF sensor is it calculates air, pounds mass of air that the engine is using based on pressure and preset settings that you put in the car. You put in the ECU in the speed density. In a MAF car, it just directly reads mass airflow. So you don't need to see manifold pressure, because all it's doing is, like, your car NA sucks in this, it takes this much time to suck in a cubic foot of air. And in a turbo car, it takes this much time to suck in a cubic foot of air. So it's still just reading more cubic feet of air in the same amount of time. Does that make sense? You're trying to force air into the engine, which creates boost. Boost is a byproduct of forcing more air into the engine. It's still metering the air, though, that's going into the engine, the mass air that's going into the engine. So what a MAP sensor does is it sees an increase in pressure, and then it says, hey, based off of the calculations that you've told me, that equals this amount of mass air, rather than reading it directly with a MAF sensor. The difference is a MAP sensor is more robust, and you can get 4-bar MAP sensors that read a phenomenal amount, and MAF sensors they just max out and then you have to go to speed density, and its speed density is just a lot more involved because you are calculating mass air versus reading mass air. So that's pretty much the difference between the two. Pre-turbo and post-turbo, the mass airflow sensor doesn't read boost anyways, so it just reads mass air. So what you're sucking in and then trying to shove in the engine, it's 1 for 1, pre and post-turbo. The turbo doesn't make air, it makes pressure because the engine can't just freely flow the air through it. So the air volume that you are drawing in is the air volume that you are pushing out. It's just compacted. That's all that it is. It draws it in, it takes that air and it stacks it into a bunch of sections that are this wide, and then the MAF sensor reads it. So pre-turbo MAF, post-turbo MAF, same read. Cleaner pre-turbo, which means the MAF sensor can read for longer. The air signal means the air signal cleanliness is huge with MAF sensor tuning. If you don't know all this, then this is probably a good video for you. Again, do your homework on how MAF sensors work. They make your life incredibly easy for their usable range. Again, I'm not saying MAF sensors are better, but this car comes with a MAF, and I'm going to try and use it for its usable range. If the range, if it maxes out, then I have no choice. And I'll be doing a conversion harness for the MAF signal to go to a MAP signal and running speed density. That's how any MAF car works. When you exceed the range of the sensor, you have to go to speed density, and then you're just stuck with speed density, or I would never go alpha N, but not on a turbo car. Anyways, you could do alpha N on a blower car, but you still need to read intake air temps for safety. But anyways, so that's sort of a thought process logic for MAF sensor tuning. And as far as the blow-off valve is concerned, the MAF doesn't care if you put the blow-off valve over here. Again, the Mustang stuff is all blow-off valves pre-intercooler. You get the blow-off valve as far away from the MAF as possible, because the opening of the blow-off valve will cause the air in the stream to kind of reverberate, and then the signal will get really dirty with the MAF. But there is ways, obviously the tuner, he can make it to where, okay, that's expected, and he can smooth that section out when you let off the throttle, if he knows what he's doing. So it's not really a big deal. It's just how you make this turbo kit. If I put the MAF pre-turbo and it draws through the MAF, then I'm going to have to recirc that back to the intake. So I'm going to have to get the QR blow-off valve, the Tile QR blow-off valve, and I'll recirc that back to the intake, because the MAF will just see air that's going in and say, hey, the engine's using this. So it gets a little funky when you do MAF pre-turbo, because you need to recirculate the air, because it will think that the air that's going out of the blow-off valve, which is going to be quite a lot, is actually going to the engine, because all it sees is airflow through the turbo. And when it sees that, then it will add fuel, right? So you just have to design your kit around a MAF. And like I said, if I go speed density at this point, then there's no changes. Basically, this will just be a pipe, and then there'll be a MAP sensor in the aluminum intake manifold, or in this throttle body adapter, because this will read the same thing. Anything post throttle body will read all the same. So I could put a MAP sensor in that throttle body, and then have to go through the tuning aspect of the MAP sensor as far as MAF signal versus MAP signal and that kind of stuff, and go to speed density. But so that's kind of the big overview of the MAF sensor stuff and why I'm staying MAF. The rest of it is not done yet right here, because I'm going to start making the hot piping today that goes to the turbo. I've already made the downpipe. That's my little mark for my O2 sensor. You see the downpipe there. It does get close to the water pump pulley here, but basically it comes out of the turbo, wraps around like this, and then comes out the fender, or the front bumper rather. And I made this cool, you know, kind of teardrop effect. I don't know, I can make these in like 10 minutes. I think it looks better than just a pipe just, you know, coming out the side. Everybody has their own preference, but I think it looks good. There you can see some of the welds, and it's V-banded. But yeah, so it's coming along. Let's see, anything else I haven't explained yet? Oh, I made a whole video just for the FOA oil accumulator that's down in there. This is my remote read on it. It was leaking out of the back cap on the oil accumulator. I basically just took the back cap off, resealed it, and put it back on, and it hasn't been leaking since. So, and I don't get any cam variator rattle. I would, okay, very inconsistent, come out and I would get cam variator rattle. Sometimes the car would sit for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I would start it for the first time, no rattle. Sometimes I would come out and the car would sit for 2 days and it would rattle. So inconsistent on that. I am using 540 oil, so I don't know, maybe that has something to do with it. But any rate, ever since I've done the FOA oil accumulator, I haven't had any rattles. But it appears that you do have to leak test the air side of the FOA accumulator. But yeah, basically it hasn't leaked since, and I haven't had any cam variator rattle. I do like that the FOA oil accumulator essentially has a restrictor like a turbo, because in the other oil accumulators you just have, you know, a 1/2-inch pipe that goes straight to the engine, and that's fine. You know, you turn the key, it shoves a bunch of oil into the engine in like half a second, and then you can start the car. But as soon as you start the car, the 1/2-inch line doesn't have any restriction. So then for ever, you know, how much ever time it takes to fill the accumulator back up, it is then basically robbing oil pressure while it's doing that. So, and they're only pre-charged about 10 pounds. So you can think to yourself, well, it's at about 10 pounds until it fills up gradually and slowly, or, you know, rather quickly. So it's going to steal oil pressure, and it gives oil pressure, and net change is better because you're not dry starting. But the FOA oil accumulator has, you know, is built under the logic of an oil restrictor, a lot like a turbo has an oil restrictor, and that way the engine oil pressure comes up, the accumulator then fills slowly over time. It will transfer oil back and forth quickly, because you don't need 3 quarts of oil just pushed into the engine instantly. So the oil pressure comes up, and the accumulator pressure will be slowly following that trend because it has a restrictor in it. So all that means for you is when you go to start it, you turn the key and you wait 2 seconds instead of a half a second. And I only do that because I don't know what the pressure is doing out here on the gauge. I have timed it, and it's about a second to go from, usually it's at 40 psi, but I just started and ran the car, and you'll see within a few minutes that'll go back up to 40 psi. But having only ran the car for 30 seconds, you know, it dumped all of its pressure, and then, you know, came back up to about 22 psi, even though the engine's at 40, 50 psi. So it does take a little time to fill the accumulator back up, but you have all the time in the world once you're post start. So I dig it. I dig the logic of the FOA oil accumulator. Just seems like they need to seal up. There's 2 O-rings in the back cap where the air pressure goes in, where the air port is, and they didn't lube those O-rings so I lubed them with grease, and then I put some pipe dope on the threads, and I haven't had any leaking since, and it's been working just fine. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the update. I know this is kind of a long, my videos are long and boring, but they're more informational. I am not moving on to the fuel system just yet on the car. There's somebody that makes rails for this, so I'm trying to get him to make me a set of rails. If not, then I'll have to make my own set out of some rail stock, which is fine. I don't mind it. But if somebody makes billet CNC rails, they just look cooler. So might as well. And then my plan is to run a 450 or a 525 Hellcat fuel pump in the tank. A typical, Aeromotive or whatever have you, regulator, and then I'll run Dash 8 line up to the rails, and I'm going to run the Demon Red Eye injectors and run the car on E85. We have a lot of E85 support where I live, and you run it on pump gas. It's just it's safety factor with the E85. I love the way it smells too. So that's kind of the plan with the fuel system. It's going to be pretty generic for any V8 car. It's just going to be on a Maserati. So take that for what it is. It's not really, informational. It's just a normal return style fuel system, and I'll be probably using the factory feed line as the return line, hijacking that as a return line, and then my pump will have a dedicated feed line that goes up to the rails, through the rails to the regulator, and then I'll hijack the return line for fuel return, just for simplicity. It's already installed on the car, so that's a pretty common practice for cars making not really a lot of horsepower. Goal is 600, 625 to the tire on this car. So if you look at Novatec cars, they're making 670 horsepower, 650 horsepower, 600 horsepower, whatever. Those, if you look at the Craftworks blower that they use in that kit, you'll know that they're making about 500 at the tire, and that's a wheel horsepower, or that's a crank horsepower number that they're giving out. So this car would be 600, 625 at the tire, and that would be 750-ish at the crank. So but I don't have any losses from rotating a blower, so you just end up seeing about 100 more horsepower than the blower cars at the tire. So if I make 600, a blower car at the same crank horsepower is going to make around 500, maybe 520, 530 at the tire. But yeah, so that's kind of the whole logic with going with turbo stuff. And obviously, if you weld, you can make them yourself, and I weld a little bit, so it's not terribly difficult to do. Takes some time, but not a big deal. Trying to think if there's anything else for this video. I don't think there really is. Again, I'm sorry these are boring, but the point is to be informational, and share information that I find, or that the things that I'm doing with the community that has never put a turbo on this car, based off of my information of turboing many different types of logics of cars. So I'll keep you guys updated on how the car comes along and that kind of stuff.